Okay, I get a lot of PMs from people messaging asking about my outside the box or analog synth setup. So I thought I'd do a little video talking through some of the equipment and how it's routed, and then do some demonstrations at the end. So if you want, you can skip forward to some of the demos, but for the first part of this I'm going to go through the equipment and how I've routed it so far. Just a quick reason I have this setup. I've got a DAW set up in a different room which I use for sort of cinematic music and music that has a very specific genre, everything from trance through to film music and so on. But this one I like because it's all about live performance. Each of the tracks that I do on this setup I've really just started and then finished, as in one long continuous piece without any breaks, and includes any mistakes, but hopefully there's less of those as we move forward. So little idea of what's here. It's I've been trying to mostly use analog equipment because it, in my view, does sound a little better than the digital equivalents. A little warmer, a lot more control, particularly a lot more control with the the various knobs and so on. So starting with the analog gear, there's the Roland or Studio Electronics SE02, which is a 3 oscillator synthesizer. I'll just give a little tinkle as I go through them. Then there's the Behringer Model D, which is based on the Moog synthesizer, of course, which again is a 3 oscillator one, very similar to the SE02 here, but this one doesn't have the built-in sequencer, it doesn't have presets, so everything you do on this one is completely live. There's no way of saving everything, so you're kind of starting from scratch. The other main analog equipment is this Elektron Analog 4. So this is 4 analog sequence synthesizers, so it's basically got 4 of one of these in, but just 2 oscillators per one of the 4 tracks. Let's just, so that's just playing I think track 3 on here, and that is sequenced internally, so it's got 4, I'll go through sequencing separately, but it's got 4 internal sequence tracks as well. The other gear, my beloved string synthesizer, which I use a lot, which is the Stretch FET string synthesizer from Waldorf. 12 nice presets, which I've already changed slightly, but provides a really nice bed to everything else that's going on. When you've got all these analog sequences going, you need some sort of bed. The other main, one of the other main sound sources is this K Oscillator Pro, which I use for soloing, through to rhythmic things by synchronizing it to the main clock, which is great fun and good if you just want to go off on a solo. Then over on this side, from a sound source perspective, excuse me, my main drums, which are kind of limited, but they're simple. They don't give you too many options. So that's this Korg Volca Beats. So these are all Volcas: Volca Beats, Volca Keys, Volca Bass, and this is just a mixer over here. But the Volca drums has obviously a bass drum that we can change slightly, longer decay, shorter decay, pitch higher, click or no click, and obviously the drum machine has the basics, hi-hats, snare drum. I'm just switching them on and off with the mute button here, claps and so on. Has a little bit of echo for certain type of effects, but I'll switch that off. Over here we've got Volca Keys, which is a polyphonic, another analog synthesizer, so these are analog as well, of course. It's got its own built-in sequencer, and I'll go through that one in a second. Then finally, with the analog stuff, is the bass, Korg Volca bass, which is an emulation of the TB303. I'll play that from over here. Very recognisable squelchy sound. Too squelchy. What else? The Digitact is really a sampler stroke drum machine, but mostly sampler. So the top 8 tracks here are really onboard samples that you can trigger, much the same way as the sequencer on the other Elektron Analog 4. And then underneath, the main reason I've got it in this setup is that I've got 8 live MIDI tracks, which I suppose I'll talk about more when I talk about how the MIDI is routed. But the next thing to talk about is the audio routing. So this will be pretty quick. The MIDI is more complex, but the audio routing is pretty straightforward. So this live mixer, this is useful for, in the case if I just want to quickly turn things on and off. And mostly there's 4 stereo tracks going into this mixer. But before I get to how that's routed, I've also got a line in for guitars. So I've got an output on this side with some effects pedals. So that's an 8-string ESP limited guitar, which I use as a line in there. I also use that same line in switchable for things like the Akai Wind synthesizer, because as well as guitars and keyboards I play saxophone, clarinet type things. Then I've got a microphone which is out of shot, which I pull down. Then I can play, in fact I can play some of these. Whoops. Suppose you hear that slightly. So acoustic instruments like the lovely Yamaha Classical. I've got a steel string guitar over there. Acoustic instruments like the soprano saxophone, and they're playing a bit hard to get at the moment because they're right around the back here. And then the clarinets. I've also got a flute and a small harp sitting behind me, which I can pull in if need be, but generally I tend to stick to the technology. So audio routing, pretty simple. I've got the analog 4 as one of the main audios going into a stereo track here, and this has 2 dedicated audio inputs. So I've got the mono feed from the Behringer Model D and the SE02 going separately into 2 of the inputs here, and then they're panned rather than full left and right. You can control them and put them more or less in the middle. So the SE02 is routed to the sort of right, and then the Behringer, make sure it's on, Behringer's slightly to the left. And I can control those on the fly if I need to, so I'm going to make the Behringer full to the left. The good thing about these 2 going through the analog 4 is I can add delay and reverb. So if I take all the delay off, I'll just put a little arpeggio on this so I can hear it. So that's I can pan in real time during the performance if I want to, because it's routed through the analog 4, and the same with the SE02. Oops. So the SE02, they should be full left and full right now, so you've got Behringer on one side, SE02 on the other. And the good thing is I can then add delay to any of these in time with the track. So that's the SE2 with some delay, and then I add delay onto the Behringer. I can also add a really nice reverb through the analog 4 onto the track too. On the SE02, and then on the Behringer. Okay, so that's just those two routed through there. The Streichfett is routed through its just another stereo track on here. It's got a very lush stereo sound, so that has to be in stereo. Particularly for things like the panning. The Volcas next are go through their own little mixer. There's a Volca mix here which takes them. These are all mono. It'd be great to have these all on separate tracks so I can pan them properly. But the Volca mix does most of is mixed into stereo. They're slightly left and right, and it's a and it's not the best sound going through the Volca mix, so I just need to expand the mixer and have that working slightly. There's some other equipment I want to incorporate into this. A Roland System 1 is sort of sitting out on the shot here, and that's going to sit by the side, and that'll be another pad and sequencers and things. The K-Oscillator Pro is just going to tape stereo in, because I needed, I'd sort of run out of stereo tracks. I've already got 2 or 10 sort of 4 stereos and then 2 monos going into this already. So this little Behringer mixer. Right, something on the sequencing now. You've already seen me do some basic stuff. Each of the keyboards here can be routed to anything else, and that's pretty important to me. So for example, if I wanted to control the Volca bass, which is on channel 10, I can simply set any keyboard to channel 10. This keyboard is routed through the Digitact, so when I choose a track on here, which is a MIDI track on the bottom, that is then sent to the corresponding instrument. Similarly this, oh I didn't mention these two actually, this is an M audio, it's just pretty basic MIDI out. I'm not using it for much more than just MIDI out into the Digitact and then to everywhere else. These are 2 Arteria key steps, and these are fantastic for basic playing right through to arpeggiating and then sequencing as well. So if I put the arpeggiator on, this is routed to the Volca bass. Put the hold on. You got a control of the rate there, and you get some really nice polyrhythmic effects if you choose a 5-part arpeggiator. And similarly this one, I can send this to channel 10. So like I said, this one, the other advantage of the Arterias is that I really use them for live. So this is for recording into the Digitact, the M audio. These 2 are used for live performance. And it also means I can, let's just send this to the SO2 quickly. So say I was playing a solo on here. as well as having control over the sound by changing it there. I've also got the performance controllers like modulation, pitch bend. Whereas this one, because it's going through the digitact, which at the moment doesn't pass through pitch bend and modulation, it's a pretty annoying limitation. So that's where I've got it set up MIDI wise, so that all of these keyboards can control everything else. Let's just go, oh sorry, the other thing with the Arturias is the sequencer mode as well. So it's got the ability to, let's just put a bass drum on, just as something in the background, or something to sync to. You can play sequences into this, so and you can append them and change them on the fly. So I'm going to add an extra note. And then, of course, you can control the... And that's the really nice, the important thing with this kind of setup, let's add some hi-hats, is that you can then control the sound on the fly in performance mode from the instrument itself. I don't, let's cancel that sequence. I don't tend to use the sequencer on these because obviously I can record much more controlled sequences into the digitact. So for example, let's say I wanted to put in a Behringer sequencer into here, choose track 15, this keyboard's now controlling the Behringer. And now I just put that into record mode. It's a, I think, slow 2-bar sequence. And then I don't think I've got these turned on. In fact, I'll turn all the tracks on here. So channel 15 is playing the Behringer. I'll just cancel that one. It's not particularly good part. So what I think I'll go through now is just some basic scenarios for playing. I'll leave the let's have a short clicky bass drum. Turn the high off a second. So let's do a basic setup. So I'm going to start with some strings, just play a 2-bar chord progression, and then no, I don't know what I'll do. I'll start with a sequencer on the SE02. So all I do for that is choose. I'll use this for that one in the arpeggiator mode. Pretty straightforward, and then if I wanted to, I could slowly build that by adding each of the oscillators potentially. So this is just a high one. I could play a solo over it to start off. As a little intro. I probably wouldn't have the bass drum going at that point. Then I can add the Streichfett by choosing MIDI channel 9 on here. Something a bit fatter than that one, I think. Obviously, while you're doing performances like this, you've got to balance everything live. I'm using headphones at the moment, so I can speak without you hearing everything coming through the speakers, but normally it'd be monitored through the speakers with the subwoofer and everything. So that's one type of start. I might add in a second oscillator on the SE02. Then I might want to bring in the Model D, perhaps lower end. So I can play this solo, or probably I'd have it doing a bit of a low bass, walking bass. Obviously you've got to try and make these instruments sound as interesting as possible, so I often use a slow LFO on the filter. Make sure I'm on the right instrument here. There we go. Sorry, that was that was actually playing the Volca bass, excuse me, it's now playing the Boog. And I've got a slow LFO on the filter just to give it a little variation as it does its thing. I've got the 3 oscillators going now. And the good thing with the arpeggiator is I can, for example, just change the format on the fly, and the same with the SE02. So if I want a big chord change with the sequencers, let's go into A flat major 7, I can just do this, and then into G minor, and because it's all synced, I've also got a rate control for the arpeggiator, so you can do pretty silly speeds. It gets too busy doing that, of course. Now I've got both of these going in, say, a basic C minor type thing. Then I can play some chords and you start to build the piece up. Okay, then of course the analog 4 is another 4 sequence parts which could and can get overkill, so I generally only use 2 of them on the analog 4, and let's just have a look at this part. I'll turn these down slightly. So I've got a really simple 2 oscillator part on here with some delay built in. I've got 2 choices for sequencing this part. I can even record it on the analog 4, or for simplicity I can record it onto the Digitact as well, and I can have 2 sequences recorded, but I'll just capture one for now. These are just 2-part sequences. And likewise, another part on here, say track 4 on MIDI channel 14. I might just play something that I can rotate pivot chords around on this one. Something that might be good for a breakdown. So the advantage of all of this is that I can just very easily switch everything off. So I've taken the holds off these 2. I can just add in the 2 analog 4 sequences, then I can go back and add some strings just as a breakdown section. Bring back the SE02, add a bit of low alpha low to the SE02 so it brings a little bit of variation to the sound. Oh, another trick I sometimes do with the SE02, so rather than tie up this Arturia on sequencer duty, is to pass the sequence into the built-in sequencer here. So the way that I do that is put this into record and then just play like an arpeggiator, or I could play it live if I wanted, but the arpeggiator works best. Oops, just check. Just making sure it's a 16 length, and off we go. So that's been passed from here to the built-in SE02 one, and the nice thing with the SE02 one is I can then play around with polyrhythmic things, so it's 10/16. Just turn off the analog 4s, just so you can hear that. I could make that 9/16, half a bar, half a measure. I'll do 12/16 and bring the boog back in. A bit of bass drum, bring the analog 4s back in, and then perhaps when it's got to this sort of stage, which is reasonably full already, it'll be quite easy to add in a little solo section either on the Chaos Pro. This is synced as well, so I can press on the clock button and it's synced to I think 16/8 notes, and this is quite a slow tempo, this one. This has got a loop function, so if I put this into record, I can actually record small loops across 4 tracks as well. You have to kind of make sure it's in time. I'll just turn that up. It's got its own built-in mixer. So I don't particularly like that one, I can just erase it. Right, I haven't touched the Volcas apart from the drums obviously at the moment. So let's put in a TB303 type bass. So track 10, I've got to play it from here. Or I could play it from here actually now, but I'll do it from here. So put this into record and go for that. So that's most of this is being played from the Digitact at the moment, apart from the sequencer built into this. Right, now we've got the TB303 in there, I can play around with the filters like you normally do with the TB303 or the Volca bass in this regard. Put some LFO on this to give it some variation. Add a bit more, let's play a few more strings over the top. The Stripes Vet can also do really nice high string lines. That type of thing. One thing we can do is break some of this down. Now we've got a lot of stuff on here. It's pretty straightforward to, let's say, lose most apart from just one analog 4 on the SE02, and perhaps have a little laid back trumpet sort of sound. So one of the challenges of this is sort of balancing sounds like the Stripes Vet over the solo. Well, let's have a look at the Volca Keys. So this, I've left this, I don't know if you can see on the cameras here, but I've left this keyboard pretty well exposed. Trouble with the Volcas is you've got a lot of wires usually around these things. But this one I can actually play the keyboard, the mini keyboard, live as well. And it's got its own built-in sequencer, so when I put it into record I can capture it purely inside the box itself. And then once it's recorded, I've got, like on all the analog synths, the ability to control the sound. So all synced together. Because this Arturia is free now, this one's being used for the Behringer at the moment. It means I can do solos on here. So for other types of solos, let's just bring the let's record a little bit of chord so I can take my hands off this one while I'm doing solo things. So I've got to record a bit on the Streichfett on channel 9 here. So that's MIDI channel 9. Turn it down a bit so it's not swamping. Right, if I wanted to do more solos, I've got 2 channels on the Analog 4 which I use quite a lot. One of them is this trumpet sound, which I sometimes play on the built-in keyboard itself. Or of course, I can play from here as well. And I can use the aftertouch because this is very good on aftertouch. So these have got aftertouch, this one hasn't. The advantage of having a couple of solo keyboards is that I can play 2 together. And I'm building the sound up now, opening the envelopes on the Behringer. Bring in one of the sequences, both sequences on the Analog 4. And then if I want to do a complete breakdown, say just with the Volca Keys left and the bass drum. I've still got this going on its own sequencer, so I'll just turn this one off. I can actually just turn off the whole sequence here. I forgot to kill the strings as well. Okay, so I hope that was a little intro to some of this. Obviously for the solo parts I could have picked up the guitar through the box or one of the other acoustic instruments and played along in real time as well. So hope that was useful. Any comments, or particularly if this was useful and you liked it, please like. Add some comments down below if there's any things I probably missed, and that's pretty likely. And also if you want to subscribe, please do, it'd be really good. Okay, thanks very much. Bye bye.